everybody, welcome back to GamerNerdz. I'm Monica Jolie. Naughty Dog once again puts us in the shoes of Nathan Drake, the world's greatest explorer. With his relationship with Sully being stretched to the limit, we get to follow Drake as he visits France, Syria, and Yemen. Naturally, nothing goes as planned and Drake gets caught up in some of the most amazing set pieces, topped off with gorgeous visuals. Is Uncharted 3 a hidden gem, or is Drake deceiving us all?
Today we're going to talk about one of the premier PS3 exclusive titles released this fall, Uncharted 3: Drake's Deception. This takes place about 2 years after the second game. Again, we're following the adventures of our hero of heroes, Mr. Nathan Drake, his partner in crime, Sully, and other people that you met in the previous titles. Essentially, the story about this one is summed up in a story of deception, a real strong focus on the relationship between Sully and Nathan, which I find actually is better than the overall story. I kind of feeling Naughty Dog is kind of running out of ideas. The story at the end sort of is very too familiar.
If you're familiar with Uncharted 1, Uncharted 2, it is all about exploration. It's all about going to places that you couldn't go to in real life and feeling like an Indiana Jones kind of person. And I really do like the Uncharted series. Personally, I do like the story, but I do have issues. And one of my issues is I feel like this game does touch on a lot of subjects and doesn't necessarily deliver on any of them. Like you were saying, the game is mostly about the relationship between Drake and Sully, but I don't feel that the game goes as deep as it should into it. One of the first levels you do explore the game is, I guess, a flashback how Sully met Drake. When I first played it, I said to myself, I really hope that there's more of this in the game.
Yeah, but you see the beginnings and they've grown into something that's, you know, an unstoppable duo.
Even the main antagonist organization in this game, how come they have access to all this intel, all this technology, whatever? The game doesn't even explore that. Twinkles all these crazy ideas in your face, gets you to go, oh, I can't wait to see what's gonna happen, and never actually delivers.
I agree with you on some points. It's just an overseeing organization that's out to kill you. They have access to a lot of resources you don't. I think the coolest thing about the game is that you are following the trail of Nathan's ancestor, which is the great Sir Francis Drake, visiting places like a jungle in France, which I never knew existed, Yemen, you visit Syria, doing the typical Uncharted theme and following all these exotic locations. And I just think having this organization, and you'll figure out who they are later on, just in general, without actually literally explaining who they are, makes it more suspenseful. The main villain, who actually is a villainess, is actually someone from Sully's past. She's very scary. She's old and frail, but she's very scary. Her delivery, she's threatening.
Yeah, you do feel that, but the characters themselves do every once in a while talk about how they don't know where this organization came from. I found myself going, okay, I can't wait, you know, for the end of the game when they reveal more information, or maybe even halfway through.
The focus, Nate is very arrogant in this game. Another important theme is stopping while you're ahead. Nate is constantly pushing himself to basically one-up this main villain, and so is Sully. I think they did a good job with just characterizing these people. The story in this one, it gets a little bit muddled towards the end. You're going through all these like crazy stuff, which you do in Uncharted games, which I love. You have to pay attention to a lot of subtle details. You're going from place to place, and if you're not following why you're doing this, you won't know while you're doing it. The story is okay in my opinion, but there are some faults in it.
I do love these stories. Like any Uncharted game, once I started it, I had to finish it. I could not put it down.
You literally beat it in one day.
It took me one single day of just playing and, you know, eating crap off the couch. I do personally feel let down that it didn't tackle everything I wanted it to cover. There's a new character that's introduced, Cutter, who is
hilarious.
Yeah, you know, I find he's very similar to Nathan. There's one thing that happens in the game where suddenly you have Drake, Sully, and Cutter in some sort of conflict. I'm not gonna say what it is, and the game kind of hinted that this could carry on throughout the story, and it just drops it.
No, it doesn't. This happens in the middle of the game. You actually find out, you know, albeit it's not very surprising, what the cause of this craziness is.
Yes, we do.
The story, again, there are hints given prior to you figuring out what the whole purpose of you visiting this lost city or why this organization wants to get there before you. They didn't do a really good job of clarifying it, because when you do find out, I was like, really, that's it? This is why they're going after this lost city? You meet a lot of characters. The relationship between Cutter and Nathan is really cool because there's just a lot of really witty quips. One of the key things about Uncharted is just the voice delivery and acting. The ones between Cutter and Nathan are fantastic. But the story does kind of lose steam halfway through, and towards the end, it's literally ripped out of Uncharted 2 and 1. So
this is a great game. I love the story. I do feel a little let down. I do feel it didn't touch on everything I wanted it to, but all in all, I liked it. Loved the experience. It's still the Uncharted experience, so I'm giving it 2 thumbs up.
We always do.
Let's get into the gameplay of Uncharted 3. So if you played 1 and 2, you are extremely familiar with the gameplay. It hasn't changed much. You're still climbing around. It's still an adventure game. It's still action. There's still shooting.
Actually, stealth. Teensy bit of stealth.
There is stealth?
Yeah, you can if you want.
Yeah, sure. So there is stealth. If you played the previous games, you played this game. It hasn't really done much to innovate. A lot of people did complain the second game was a huge step up from the first game, and then
It wasn't a huge step up.
People are saying that in between the second and third, there was not much of a jump. Yes, they are right, but I don't think people should necessarily complain about that. Going from the second to the third, I guess in a sense, they've almost peaked up on the technology. You can't blame them for not really over-innovating. I am annoyed with the fact that they didn't fix some issues, for example, with the shooting, things like that returned from the second game that were not.
Actually, I think it's the other way around, because the shooting, which is obviously the core game mechanic in this, aside from the puzzles, which we'll talk about in a second, actually is worse than the second game. It has been an issue identified, and I noticed this right away. The first gun you get, lining up headshots in this game, it's very difficult because there is a bug with the aiming. In the second and first games, you could be 100 feet away, climbing over a cliff, and you could headshot a guy no problem. In this one, they can be point blank. For some reason, the aiming reticle becomes very slow over a person's body. Very, very difficult to aim, so there is a patch. I didn't like that at all.
He actually sent me a few texts saying, what happened to the shooting? And I was just like, no, calm down. Because
I was freaking out.
I started off playing the game as per usual on hardcore, and I think it's the hard.
He was playing on casual.
On the hard,
he was playing on casual.
Hard difficulty setting. The aiming was throwing me off, so I actually had to dumb it down to normal, which I'm not proud of.
Okay, that's his explanation.
I'm honest. Just like the second game where they had the whole helicopter scene. Like,
that was amazing.
Yeah, exactly. In the third one, you would expect it, and there are similar things, but don't necessarily expect to be blown out of the water.
Come on. There's a whole section of the game focused around water levels.
Yeah, okay.
Those are amazing. There's a lot more sections in this game where Nate is running from things. Him and Sully should have died like a million times in this game. Some of the set pieces are amazing. Aside from the story being so-so, the actual jump from puzzle to action to you're gonna die any second now is really well done. Another really important part of the Uncharted series has been the puzzle elements. There are a few pretty good puzzles in this one. One of them in particular had me stumped for a while, manipulating this puzzle to insert pieces. Very well done. It's exploration, it's puzzle, it's combat. If you play the first two games, then you'll be right at home with this one.
One thing I will say, and this is actually a good point, is this is the first time in the Uncharted series where you actually feel that the situation that Drake is in, he's gonna die. From a story and gameplay point of view, it is a little bit more mature. If you enjoy the last two, you'll enjoy this one.
A lot of you have, because this one has sold well. This is the third one. It's not a trilogy. There's gonna be more. Let's see Naughty Dog innovate more. If they have to is a question I don't know. It still is fun. It still is great. They're creative as hell, because some of those set pieces, oh my gosh. So another thing that's been brought over from the second game and refined is the multiplayer aspect of Uncharted. There was a huge, well thought out beta sponsored by Subway. People were playing the game for a long period of time, giving their input. So you had the typical multiplayer deathmatch and other modes that were present in the second game. And there's the ever-present co-op mode, which is my favorite actually. You'll actually be playing out scenes from the main game with some partners. The aiming is fixed in co-op. There's a great community. Naughty Dog supported the multiplayer for a long time in Uncharted 2. Definitely expect map packs, new skins, and all these new features coming as DLC down the line. Let's talk about the visuals behind Naughty Dog's third try at the Uncharted series. I think we say this a lot of games, but it is gorgeous. The cutscenes, it can look like a CG scene. The texture work, environments, the color, lighting effects. There are certain areas that there's a lot of fire. Those areas are beautiful because the environment's falling to pieces. Environmental effects, we'll do a regular jump and something will happen instantaneously. Very smooth transition. The animations are top notch as usual. Surprisingly, two portions where Nate is walking through really tight areas to follow Cutter, who's claustrophobic. Voice acting there is fantastic, but just like the animations, it's all very natural.
I do like the fact they did that. They introduced little elements that don't necessarily need to be in the game, but they make the game feel more alive. It makes you feel like the characters are real.
And actually, that whole section I read actually was ad-libbed. They weren't going to put that in, and the voice actors decided to have a little skit and they included in the game. So that part's really cool. There's a portion of the game basically surrounded in water. Water effects are gorgeous, and there's two scenes where it pans out a la God of War, and you just see Nate. You get a sense of scale. It's just a very pretty game.
Obviously saw the trailers before the game came out. You're aware that there's potentially a desert scene in the game.
And those are real time, those are not CG.
I really like those. I do feel it did drag on a little bit, but I loved the way it was done in the sense that, I'm not gonna spoil anything, but the game does bring up this theme of a sense of despair.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And they really zeroed in on it in that section. Visual point of view, this is fantastic.
Uncharted 1 is pretty. Uncharted 2 blew it out of the water, literally. Uncharted 3 is not as significant as an upgrade, but it is one pretty game. The voice acting is one. Facial animation. People behind Deus Ex take point because this is how you animate people.
Seriously.
There's one scene where you are talking to the villainess at a table face to face. She looks real. Her face is wrinkled. She has like subtle movements in her eyebrows. It is just best of the best animation. One of the things that sets apart Uncharted from other series is voice acting. Not surprisingly, Nolan North has another role here. I think he just lives by voiceover acting for video games, but he does a really good job at it. The voice acting is just super natural, funny, little clips they have as they're exploring. There's one character who comes back from the previous games. There's a change in her voice. You see when she gets sad, when she gets surprised. Voice acting, second to none. It's the best.
In the past games, for the most part, Nathan always played that kind of confident and cocky kind of role. The way he interacts with some characters, it brings out different sides of him that you haven't seen before. Some moments he actually seems literally sad, and other moments he seems scared, you know, so...
angry and revengeful.
Like I was saying, this is a more mature take on the Uncharted games.
Obviously, Naughty Dog doesn't want to slouch on the music. This one has those very epic orchestral themes, very subtle themes, very moody themes. The game itself has a fantasy theme from previous titles. And when you meet the fantasy villain in this game, the music also builds up that set of fear. It's almost like a Jaws moment because you want to get the hell out of there. This is a game that has linear PCM tracks. It's 7.1 surround sound. Turn the lights off, get into the game, it really draws you in.
So visuals, voice acting, music, booyah, we love it.
Fantastic.
Uncharted. So let's get into the content of Uncharted 3. Obviously, we have the story campaign. Within that, you have different difficulty settings. And then there's the co-op, I guess the multiplayer, which we already talked about. Beyond that, not really aware of any DLC, and you're the king of DLC in this, so
let's see how much focus he paid to the game. The single player game on typical difficulty is about 10 hours. It's 22 chapters. I think it was shorter than the second game. You have the single player content, you have the treasures. I think they realized that they were too hard to find in the second one. Found about 60 on my first go.
And actually tried to find them.
Well, yeah, you search, you're a treasure hunter, might as well. The second one, it had a huge range and location. I couldn't find anything. This one, it's a bit easier. But I think after you beat the main game, either on easy, normal, hard, or crushing difficulty, the multiplayer is going to get the most plays. There's only a few co-op missions available now. More hopefully will be added via DLC, and you should see a lot more content for multiplayer. Online pass-based game, so you buy it used, you gotta pay to play online.
Unlike him, when it comes to the Uncharted series, I don't really care about the multiplayer. I'm all about that story. Once I beat the story, I put it down. But I will admit, it's great multiplayer, so good stuff, guys.
Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the show. See you next time on GamerNerdz.
Really? That's the one they've ever played it?
I don't do multiplayer, right? Multiplayer? Is there multiplayer in the game? What?
France, Syria, and Yemen.
Yeah.
Yemen. France, Syria, and Yemen. 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 Yeah, man. France, Syria, and Yemen. Yemen.